are very excited at this point in our day to introduce to you our keynote speaker. In order to do that, I want you to first watch this short video to learn a little bit more about him.
May 18th was a normal day at the Speedway. It's funny because we don't normally get that day. You know, normally after qualifying, we're off until carb day, and it was sort of a new thing that we were going to get an extra day of practice to work on the race cars. I was running behind Montoya, and I remember that I was gapped very well, and I thought, oh, this will be a nice big toe lap. We're not going to learn anything, but this will be a nice big number, and it'll make everybody happy, you know? The last thing that I remember was the start of that lap. Kind of around turn 2, I sort of lose anything, and I think I'm pretty thankful for that, to be honest, because shortly thereafter it all sort of went pear-shaped. There's a lot of things there that very mercifully I'm spared any memory of. It's so crazy to think that a human being can survive something like that.
Hinch nearly died from this. I give the highest praise to the safety crews of what they did to get him out of the car. Luck was involved. If that piece of car had gone a half an inch one way towards the middle, they would have never gotten him out alive. I knew he was hurt. It was pretty clear to most of us watching in the infield hospital that he was hurt, just watching his head bob. And the first thought that comes to mind is head injury, or you know, that he was knocked unconscious, or he couldn't breathe, or he didn't have an airway. It looked like he had lost a lot of blood and that he was bleeding to death. I thought during that procedure there was just one point where I wasn't sure he was going to make it. But then he responded, and we got him out of the OR, went to the ICU. He was on life support. After surgery, I was fairly certain that I could get him through it, that he was going to be okay.
I knew where I was. I knew, that I was here at Methodist, and I knew that those were the best people. And so I just said, yeah, I'm going to let them do their job, and whatever they say, I'll do it, because you know what you're doing, and I do not. I'm not going to pretend like I know. This is serious. I'm going to let you take care of it.
Any injury that a patient sustains and they end up in the hospital, one of the quickest things that you want to get a patient doing is getting up and being mobile, walking, moving around. All he could talk about is what he could do to get better so he could get back in the race car as quick as he could. Having the resources we have at a great wound team here, it definitely took all of us to, keep a good eye on his wounds, make sure he wasn't getting any infection, and everything was looking like it was healing healthy. It was definitely a joint effort.
Methodist is a level 1 trauma center. The worst of the worst come here. It's the highest level of care that somebody who's seriously injured would require. The course he had post-injury was remarkably smooth, considering the real lethal nature of his injury. For the most part, drivers are so well protected these days. They survive the most horrific crashes. But we're prepared to take care of the worst catastrophe, and the system is set up to respond immediately to get them to the level of care that they need.
Everybody always thinks, well, that's not going to happen to me. But you honestly have to think it could happen to you. IU Health Methodist is kind of where I got my second chance, and it's just knowing that it is the highest level of care you could possibly get.
I am very hopeful, and I do believe that we'll see James in the race car in 2016.
Getting permission and getting that opportunity to get back in the car is going to be a huge relief.
What is the survival rate of an injury like this?
0.
What happened is it hit me right here, and it came out of me right here. The exit wound and the entry wound was so big, he said he had his whole fist in it, trying to stop the bleeding. That's all that's left.
Unbelievable.
He was in such great physical condition that he survived an injury that none of us would have survived.
First words that came out of his mouth to me was, "I'm really sorry, Mom, I'm not an accountant." Then I said to him, "We'll get you back in the car before the end of the year." Sorry. Because he needed to hear that.
It was only 18 months ago. How the heck are you on this sharp? James doesn't understand how incredible he is. Within 18 months, he went from someone assisting him to walk to killing ballroom dance. I don't want you to spend this week getting frustrated. This is a chance to tell a little bit of your story.
I'm a competitive person, so the last thing I want to do is make another mistake. I want the things that I can control to be done right. I would gladly go back and suffer through whatever I had to suffer through if I got to come out the man that I am today. That accident is the best thing that ever happened to me.
He is Indy, 5-time IndyCar winner, a recipient of IndyCar Series Most Popular Driver, and runner-up on last year's Dancing with the Stars. Please welcome James Hinchcliffe.
This one's me?
Yes, please. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me up this morning.
Good morning, James. In our preparation for this, James and I have had an opportunity to talk online, and yesterday we had a chat from Calgary, or St. John's, Calgary.
Yes, Calgary.
Had a quick chat just to make sure he was good to go, and I told him there was about 70% of you in the room were nurses, so he thought he had lots to share with you, and so for that we're grateful. So James, one of the things that we noticed in the video is the horrific crash, and a lot of credit has been given to your skilled team and first responders. Can you explain to the group about the first responders, their role and responsibilities?
Yeah, sure. It's actually one of the really neat things about the IndyCar series is we are the only professional racing series on earth that has a dedicated safety team that travels with us to each and every race. The safety team is comprised of mainly volunteers who are nurses, EMTs, a lot of firefighters, and they volunteer their time on race weekends. We have a pool of about, I think, 25, and so we kind of rotate through those guys, but they come to every single race. Like I said, they're very experienced in their day jobs for this kind of thing, but because it's the same group week in and week out, they learn constantly on the job. And racing throws some curveballs when it comes to things like driver safety and the accidents that we have, and that group is just so prepared for anything because they've got so much experience. A lot of other series, they'll pull local people who might just kind of work that one race every year sort of thing. But for us, we're very, very lucky to have a dedicated team that's with us week in and week out. Makes a big difference.
Any Canadians on that team?
No, unfortunately, no.
Just checking.
Yeah.
Future opportunities.
Exactly right. Yeah, if you're interested, I'll take your resume.
Yeah, take your resume. So can you tell us about the comfort then of having that team, knowing that team is with you versus the volunteer part where you said some race organizations rely totally on volunteers?
It's huge. It'd be hard to overstate how important that is to the drivers in our series. There's no doubt that IndyCar racing is a little bit more dangerous than most other forms of motorsports. All motorsports is dangerous. What we do is particularly nuts and stupid. So for us, strapping into these cars every week, it's a huge comforting factor knowing that I know personally by name everyone that's in safety truck 1, everyone that's in safety truck 2, everyone that's in safety truck 3. I know where in the track they're located. I know if I get in trouble with something and I still have some control of the car, I can get there, and I know that they're going to be right there to take care of me. You've got confidence in their ability to help you in a given situation. And more importantly, you've got the confidence that they're going to help you in a situation that you have no control over, like what happened to me. You saw in the video the safety truck was to my car within seconds of its stopping moving. I'm not going to say stop rolling because there's no wheels left, but stop moving. And they've got a very specific procedure that they explained. They sit all the drivers down and explain to us what happens in the event of a crash. This guy's going to go here and do this. This one's looking for fire. This one's checking the driver. All these different elements. And it's funny for me now knowing that you watch that video and you see them. They just execute perfectly every time. And as a driver, it gives you a tremendous amount of confidence to go out there and essentially put your life on the line every week.
Yeah, interesting. So when you tell us more now about your hospital stay. So in the video you mentioned that you're glad you didn't remember part of it, but you woke up in the hospital. Mm-hmm. Can you share with the nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals what that was like for you?
Yeah, certainly. So We'll back up a little bit. So I had the accident. They got me out of the car, which was a little bit of a drama because I had this steel rod through my body, through my lower body, and they didn't know that. They got to the car. I was conscious, but massively concussed, obviously in shock, not very together, and I was having trouble verbalizing what was wrong. Clearly at the time I didn't really realize I'd been speared by something. I was a shish kebab, and there was, or a hinch kebab as we joke later. And so they quickly figured out what had happened, and so getting me out of the car was a bit of a process. And then protocol would normally be to go to the infield medical center. So each track has, if it's a permanent facility, a medical center on site. If it's a street circuit like the one we race here in Toronto, a building will be dedicated and set up as sort of a temporary hospital. And protocols to go there, kind of get evaluated, and then decide whether or not you need to be transported to the closest level 1 trauma center, which we have mapped out at every track. Luckily for me, Indianapolis is the closest to its level 1 trauma center of all the tracks that we race at. It's 4 miles on the same road. Okay. So turn out of the track, turn left 4 miles, and you're at Methodist Hospital. Any other track, I would have bled to death before I got to the hospital. So I was very lucky in that sense. But because my injury was so bad, once they got me out of the car, they didn't even stop at the medical center. They knew I had to go straight to the hospital. So they rolled by the medical center, threw the door open, and let the trauma surgeon jump in. Quite literally, didn't even come to a complete stop, and then they started heading down to Methodist. So they got me there, through surgery, all the rest of it. I wake up, and last thing I remember, I'm driving my car, everything's great, I'm at the Indianapolis 500, things are, hunky-dory. And then I wake up with 6 very bright lights in my face, a tube down my throat, I'm strapped to a board, and a bunch of very concerned people standing around me. And I thought, this is not good. Something's gone very wrong here. And, I had a tube down my throat, I couldn't speak, so I was communicating with a pen and a piece of paper, and it was probably about 10-ish hours after the accident. I recognized one guy in the room, and it was actually a fellow driver, Marco Andretti, a very good friend of mine. He had left the track after the accident and had come to hospital to see how I was, and I was talking with him. I was trying to figure out what happened. I was very confused. It's very confusing doing one thing one moment, literally the next moment doing something very, very different than that. And he explained to me what happened. We were kind of chatting on paper, like I said, and by about the 8th question back and forth, I was already cracking jokes to him about, he's a big fan of running 5Ks and posting it all over Twitter, and so I made a joke about that. He goes, all right, he's fine, and he left and went back. But so that started by my stay in hospital, and I have a lot of respect for everybody in this room and what you guys do, because there's no doubt that my accident, my injury, my recovery was made all the better by the quality of people that I was surrounded by, and obviously the surgeons to the RNs, PT, like everybody involved. What was so phenomenal for me was there's a lot of qualified people. There's a lot of people that can go out there and just do the task. But what's so special about what you guys do is that human element. That's what makes such a big difference for a patient, and that's what made such a big difference for me. There's a bunch of people that could have physically done whatever it is that needed to be done, But there was this really personal connection with a lot of them, which when you're living there for a couple weeks, it goes an awful long way.
So when healthcare professionals have clients that are interesting to work with, what would you say to encourage healthcare professionals?
You know what? It's one of the things that I learned while going through this was really how incredible the human body is. You guys probably know this better than 99% of people, but I was naive like everyone else. Ignorance is bliss. It just kind of works. I don't have to, But when you go through something like that, you appreciate how much. What I found was how much the mind really affected the healing. And so I think for patients, it's important to figure out what motivates them and what's going to motivate them to get better. Now, luckily in my case, that was pretty easy. I was a pretty easy case in that sense. I was very determined and motivated right off the bat. But even just in getting to know, my nurses and everyone that helped, they said that was a huge difference that they noticed compared to the average patient. Was I had a goal, I had something that I was fighting for, and was willing to do whatever it was I needed to do to get back in the car as soon as possible. What's funny is, as a competitor, right? I always want to do more. I want to push myself further and go harder and whatever. But when you're recovering, you have to do nothing, right? The body has to heal. Pushing yourself is just going to set you further back. And this was a really sort of counterintuitive idea for me. And so I had to make a game out of how much nothing could I do. I had to somehow make that work in my head, which was really tough. But I started this game. All right, I'm going to do so much nothing, you guys are going to be blown away. And so you find what motivates them, and I think that goes a long way because it gets the mind, in line with the body.
You mentioned accounting on the video. Tell me about that part of your thinking when you had the conversation with your mom.
So, my poor mother. I started racing go-karts at 9 years old, and there was a brief phase in my childhood where I have an older brother and an older sister. I was racing go-karts. My brother was getting his pilot's license, and my sister was showing horses. It's that poor woman. And my sister was actually nearly killed in a horse accident when she was 14. So she's been through this kind of thing before. But my parents are my biggest supporters, and there's a lot of times in my life where it would have been really easy for mom to just say, no, you're not doing this anymore. Yeah. I started at 9. At 12 years old, my racing hero was a Canadian driver named Craig Moore, and he was killed in an accident in 99, and I'm 12. It would have been really easy for mom and dad to be like, all right, here's some skates, here's a tennis racket, here's some golf clubs, pick one, anything you want. Here's a calculator, be an accountant. But they let me make that decision on my own, and have supported me, the whole way through. So it was, I'm so lucky in so many ways, but having the support of them and, putting my mom through what I put her through every single week is cruel, but she tolerates it and is very supportive.
Was she there as part of your rehab stay then? Was she able to get down to see you?
She was. So my parents were actually on vacation when the accident happened. And, they got a phone call saying, James has been in an accident. There's a plane on the tarmac. You need to be in Indianapolis. You can imagine that's not a very fun flight. They took off. I was just going into surgery. They had no idea. 3.5 hours, no communication. I can't imagine. I'm not a parent. I almost don't want to be a parent now just after that story. But they got there, and so my mom actually kind of moved to Indianapolis and stayed with me through my recovery for a large part of it. She's very hands-on. She should have been a nurse, in all honesty. She's very hands-on in that sense, and isn't afraid of a little blood. Or I had some wounds in some pretty compromising places. I had some interesting things that needed to be dressed and addressed, and she was number one. She was the biggest part of the team, and was a huge part of getting me better. Yeah.
Can you walk us through a time frame then, James? Because 18 months was mentioned in the video. Walk us through sort of from injury, surgery. What was the time frame for rehab?
Right. So injury happened on May 18th, and when I woke up, it was a couple days before I was really able to process it all. And they said realistically I probably wasn't going to get out of bed for about 2 weeks. I'd probably be in hospital for a month, and I wouldn't drive a car for 6 or 7 months. That was kind of the timeline that we were working on. I walked on day 4. I got out of the hospital in 10 days, and I drove a car 4 months later. So I was a little bit ahead. I'm a competitive person. What can I say? You know, they set goals like that.
Did you hear the groans in the room?
I'll show you. I know, right?
I heard the groans. Where the physio and the OTs are.
But I did it by listening to what you guys told me to do. I didn't try to overdo that. I tried to just do exactly what it's like I said in the video. I know that I don't know what I'm doing here, and I know that you guys are the professionals. So one of the greatest lessons my dad ever taught me in life was know what you don't know. Right? Surround yourself with the people that know what you don't, and together you're going to be a great team. It's all about teamwork. And so I got out of hospital. I was still in and out every other day. Had to go to a wound clinic to change my dressings. I was using a negative pressure wound vac, and one of my favorite stories is I was going into wound care to get my dressings changed, and I'm in this room. Okay, I'm in this room. There's my nurse Liz, who's in the video, my surgeon Dr. Pullman, a couple other, I think another surgeon, another nurse. All these grown-ups. They are very educated, very experienced people in the field. And I'm there, kind of leaned over this bed, and they're, on the other side, checking out. And it was the funniest thing because they peel this dressing off, and every time I went in, it was these gasps, right? It was like, oh, look how good! Can you believe? And I'm like, you guys are seriously excited about what's going on back there? Like, it was the weirdest experience. I never saw it. I had no idea what it looked like. But it was the most fascinating thing for them was seeing how well that was, coming along. So that was an interesting part of it for sure. So that was for about a month, and then I think I had another. That came off at about another couple weeks, and then I had a colostomy during it as everything was healing, and so I had the colostomy take down, and that was kind of my last surgery. And then it was about a month to 5 weeks after that they let me back into a race car.
And your mother said,
"Why are you doing this to me?" No, like I said, they're biggest supporters. Again, you saw in the video, she told me what I needed to hear, and even though. Here's the thing, because a lot of people ask, did they ever try and talk you out of getting back into the car, right? And the simple answer is no, and it's because they know better. They knew that even if they asked, the answer was going to be, well, clearly, I'm sorry, guys, I'm still going to get back into the car. That's why I'm here. This is what I do. And so they were, they never even crossed their mind to ask. It was always just, all right, what can we do to support them to get them back? So, like I said, very, very lucky.
In your mind, ever a moment where you were like, I don't know if I could do this again?
Nope.
No.
No, racing drivers are wired differently. I think we lack that self-preservation gene that most humans have. Because it's a funny story. So I woke up, talking with pen and a piece of paper. My third question was, when can I get back in a car? And the doctors were in the room like, are you out of your damn mind? The car's what put you, just slow down a little bit. So no, from the minute I woke up, it was okay, something's happened, I can't change that. What can I affect now to get me back there as quickly as possible?
What was that like when the healthcare professionals were more worried than you?
I mean, it didn't affect me. They were a little more thrown off by it than I was, certainly.
Yeah, really interesting, really interesting. So, questions from the audience for James. There's a couple of mics in the room. I have a couple more that I'll ask him, but then please prepare your questions because we have time to take questions from the audience or any other thoughts and words of wisdom, James. So, in terms of teamwork, what do you think of wound care teams?
It's funny. So, a lot of people think of racing as an individual sport. Right, they see one driver in the car, and so it's like golf or tennis or the rest of it, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So I'm the guy in the car, sure, but there's a team of 6 guys that come over the wall for every pit stop, and if one person drops a wheel nut or doesn't get a wing change in or doesn't get the fuel probe in, race is gone. Before we even start the race, there's another 5 or 10 mechanics that are helping build the car and put the setup on that the engineers determine. Then you got the engineers, you got 6 guys that are just sitting there with laptops looking at gigs and gigs of data, trying to figure out what the perfect settings are for the car for that given day. It takes 25 people just to get an Indy car on the track. So, and then furthermore, my life is literally in the hands of the guys that build my car. So you have to have a trust and a respect that's, the absolute maximum. So it really is a team sport. So I'm no stranger to teamwork, and throughout my recovery, that was a huge underlying theme. You know, the nurses that were taking care of me every night in my room, and the wound care team that was dealing with my dressing and my surgeon, we were all in constant contact. We were all keeping track of progress throughout the whole thing. Then as I got into PT, they were always communicating with my surgeons and all the rest of it. And it was interesting for me to see how much correlation there was between all the departments and communication, and how much of a team it really is. And that was just one case. I was just one patient. And they're doing this for everybody, you know, so it's the amount of communication required, the amount of teamwork required to make something like that happen like clockwork every day with every patient that comes through is incredible. I commend you guys again on how you do it, because it's not an easy task.
Yeah, very good. Let's take our first question then. Nice and loud. You pull the mic right down. There you go.
I'm short. I did. James, thank you so much for sharing. It was really enlightening, and I think it's a lot like what Robin was saying, is that you just get little pearls from everything that the conference offers, and I certainly got a couple of pearls, well, lots of pearls, but it was really know what you don't know, which is kind of funny, because I guess my book came from your dad. And then things like, surround yourself with an incredible team, or people, things that you don't know, and then they're going to reach you. Thank you. I have just a curious question, really. When you had the accident and you had this steel rod through you, did they transfer you to the hospital with this rod?
Great question. As I said, the nature of the injury was very rare. It's not often that part of the car comes into the cockpit, and in the few examples where that has happened, it's either missed the driver, or it's usually been lower extremity stuff, so through the calf or something like that. So when they got to the car, they couldn't see that had happened, and like I said, I couldn't communicate what was wrong. So they tried to lift me out of the car, and I didn't move. They're like, man, he's heavy. He's a fat little Canadian. It's like, all right, let's try this again. So they tried again, and I wouldn't move. And so they thought maybe the tub, the cockpit, had compressed a little bit in the impact, and that something was kind of trapping me in there. So they grabbed spreaders and started pulling. And as they did that, they heard this pop and kind of felt this release of energy. And they were like, what was that? And they put their hands, so like, all right, let's get him out. So they had, I think, 3 guys around me, and one put his hands under my thighs. I thought, this seems warm and wet. And he took his hands out, and they were covered in blood. So then they kind of start piecing together what had happened, and it was, once they kind of looked down in the car, there was an alarming amount of blood. My femoral artery was hit, and so I was leaking at a tremendous rate. Leaking, to use a racing car term.
Yes.
And
we'll translate.
Yeah. And so the decision was made. The piece was still attached to the car, and it's a 4-inch thick piece of steel. There was no real way to remove it and me at the same time. So ultimately, what they had to do was just pull me off the rod. In the moment. So, you touched on parts that I'm happy I don't remember. That's one of them. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Apparently, I wasn't very pleased. I was still conscious at this time. I think I passed out shortly after. But yeah, they said I had some choice words for them when they started getting me out of the car.
A bit of vernacular happening.
Yeah, because I know usually you try and not remove something but they didn't really have that option.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah.
On the left, please.
Dave's a huge racing fan, and it's wonderful to have a Canadian to cheer for, so all the best. So I really appreciated your talk. I'm a recently retired clinical nurse specialist in Burns, who for 39 years have heard something that you mentioned in your video, and I don't know if anyone caught it, but it's now the focus of my career, which is post-traumatic growth. And you said that your life was basically better, and you had learned so much, and your life had improved since this major trauma in your life had occurred. Could you share with us a little bit about how your life has changed for the better since this life-altering event?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the question. It's a funny thing when people hear me say that. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. They look at me kind of like the doctors did when I asked when I get back in a car. So professionally, it didn't change me at all. And I think that's what a lot of people were sort of looking for, was are you more timid? Are you more nervous to get in the car? And the answer is no. I'm no different as a driver than I was before. I'll take the same risks and accept the same consequences as I did before. Personally, an event like that changes you tremendously. I'm a very fortunate person. Timing was right to be in the career that I'm in. I know it's very difficult to do what I do, and I've always been very thankful for that and appreciative of that. But there's a lot of little things in life that I took for granted, I think, the way a lot of people do. I remember the day I was able to put my socks on by myself for the first time. I cried. You know, it's things like that you just take for granted. It's people in your life. It's moments in your life. You know, I kind of now live by the philosophy: live each day as if it's your last, because one day you'll be right, and you just don't know when that day is going to happen. It really could be any time. There was clearly a reason that I'm still here. You know, it was clearly some unfinished business for me, and I don't take that for granted now. And every day is an opportunity. Every day is, you know, a new adventure, and you just kind of it just opens your eyes a little bit, makes you look at certain things a little bit differently.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's a great question. Thank you. Who was next?
Hi, I know nothing about racing, but I follow other sports, and obviously nutrition is extremely important for wound healing. And I know with other sports like hockey, you're stating that they have nutritionists working with them, and they also have sports psychologists. And I'm wondering if racing does have that?
Thank you for the question. Yes, racing does. It's racing is a little unique in the sense that in a lot of kind of traditional team sports, a team will provide, you know, an entire team of trainers and physio and sports psychologists, nutritionists, all that sort of thing. In motorsports, it's really on the driver to kind of manage their own program in that sense. So I have to source out, find and hire my own trainer, nutritionist. I worked with a sports psychologist for a number of years, especially when I was younger, kind of coming up. And still do occasionally. It's like other sports in a lot of ways in that sense. There is, even behind the team that runs the car, there's the team of people just behind the athlete that, you know, try to get them into their you know, fittest and best performing mode, for sure. Yeah. But the nutrition thing in recovery was funny because I lost a lot of weight, obviously, being in hospital. So it was really cool getting told to just gain as much weight as possible. And just how much protein can you eat in a day? And it's a challenge accepted. You know, this is great. This is now you're speaking my language. You know, so I learned a lot about nutrition actually through that whole thing. Just, you know, how the body reacts to certain things.
So part of doing nothing included ordering food.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's a good part of doing
great.
Nothing. Another question.
This was wonderful hearing you talk about your experience, and
thank you.
Myself, as far as in the past, I was a marshal at California Motorsports.
Okay.
And as a volunteer, when you were out there on the track, we weren't given that much training, okay? And then you just provide an ambulance, and hopefully you get the person from California to a hospital in time. Or you were brought in a beautiful orange helicopter, and that's how the person would get to for assistance. My question for you is that after your experience, did they make changes as far as how the race cars are being made so that it's safer for the drivers?
Thank you for the question, and for your service at Calabogie. And the answer is yes. Yeah, the one thing that there are kind of two things that we accept about safety in motorsports. The first is that it will never be 100% safe, and the second is that we will never stop trying to make it 100% safe. And so every time there's an incident where there's an injury, there's a huge investigation. The car is actually equipped with a lot of sensors that provide a lot of data for the series to look at and address. But a lot of massive safety advancements have come because of IndyCar racing. You know, we've been kind of leading the charge because we're at the greatest risk. That's track safety, car safety, the gear that we wear, helmet safety, things like that. We're always constantly pushing. So in my particular case, the component that failed that caused the accident was changed. The part that went through the car, which just never should have happened in the first place, was altered to make sure that it could never penetrate the car. There was extra material added to the side of the car to prevent intrusion from any other object. So yeah, anytime we have an incident like that, there's, it's like a lot of things in life, right? It takes something bad to happen for some change to come about, and racing's no different. But I'm happy that at least there was a positive that came out of it. Hopefully nobody has to go through what we did.
James, for people in the room, teach us about the safety risk in Indy compared to other types of racing. Do you mind explaining that?
Sure. So the biggest difference between, there's two elements. The first is, an open cockpit car versus a closed cockpit car. So in Indy car, it's single seater, your head's exposed. So anytime your head's exposed, that's a huge risk. So compared to, say, NASCAR or sports car racing, where you have a roof and a windshield, the danger is inherently higher. Now, Formula One's the other predominant open wheel series. They don't run on ovals, and it's the ovals that are really the very dangerous ones because of the speed, the proximity to the other cars, and the fact you're either going to hit a concrete wall or a fence if something goes wrong. Neither one of those are particularly kind to race cars. So, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, like that accident there, I was traveling about 350 kilometers an hour when I hit the wall.
In an oval.
Right. And so there's not a lot of other series where you can be only that far off a wall going that speed and the rest of it. So the open wheel element and then the fact that we race on ovals is kind of what makes IndyCar a little bit riskier than others.
Riskier. That's a good explanation. That helps. Thank you, because I didn't know the difference. Question, please. Yes, please.
Hi, James. It's nice to see you, and you that you got such great care. I'm a Methodist. It's a wonderful facility. I actually did my nursing training in Indianapolis.
Oh, cool.
I'm from Canada, though, just like you. My question was, I saw in the video you mentioned going in for your dressing changes. So I'm just curious about their model of aftercare. Were you always followed up in a clinic that was in an acute care setting, or what exactly was that model?
So initially the plan was to actually have a nurse come to the house each day just to kind of monitor there were certain things that had to be done every day, certain things could be done every other day. But we established pretty quick that between my girlfriend at the time and my parents, they could manage whatever the in-home nurse was going to be doing, and so we just we did that stuff ourselves, and then we relied on the wound clinic every other day for the larger dressing changes. A lot of it was kind of monitoring progress for them as well. Like I said, I had the negative pressure wound back, and so determining when it was time to stop that treatment was kind of on them. And yeah, so that basically once that stopped, once I could give that machine up, I think I went in once a week just for kind of progress updates, let them see the wounds, make sure there's no infections, things like that. That was kind of the schedule that we were on. Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you, Kirsten.
Hi, Janet. Do we know each other? So I go back to what you were saying about your sports psychologist. So with a traumatic injury like this, there's often that emotional lens that's coming through with the wound care as well too, right? There's pain involved, there's all those other parts. So did you have a psychologist working with you during that wound care or social work? Was that person brought into your team by your other wound care people, or was that brought in by you?
Right, so...
And that's a psychological side of it.
Right, great question. Thank you. The service was offered, but I actually didn't need it post-accident, and I think it's largely because I had no memory of the accident. If I had memory of going straight into a wall at 350, and I had memory of being speared, and I had memory of being pulled off that thing, that may have changed things a little bit. But the two elements that I attributed to not really needing a sports psychologist for to overcome getting back in the car was no memory of it, and the other was it wasn't my fault. It's this weird thing to say. It was a mechanical failure. There's nothing I did wrong that caused the accident. If I had done something or made a mistake as a driver that led to that probably would have been more confidence shattering than just, hey, I'm along for the ride here. As drivers, we accept that if there are 1,000 variables in a race, we control about 10. And you are a passenger a lot of the time. So I think those two elements made it very easy for me to not really need that sort of help. As soon as I woke up, I made sure that I didn't really attribute any of the pain or anything that happened there on out with the race car, with the track, to me they were completely separate things, not connected in any way. And I was able to sort of make that separation in my own mind, and that it was never really an issue.
That's really interesting, actually. Now, how was the recovery from a pain perspective then?
Not too bad. In all honesty, they had to go in through my abdomen to get to my artery, and that was the worst part, was just, getting over open abdomen surgery. But they managed it very well, and like I said, I was told to not do anything, so I did nothing, and that's not too painful. So I was really lucky in a lot of ways, and that was one of them. It was relatively manageable.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So we have time for the last 2 questions. That would be great. Oh, she was here.
Good morning. Thank you very much for being here today. A big inspiration for all of us. I'd like to know if we can share your story. So I'm from Canada. I've been a nurse for 30 years, and now we're in academics, so we teach at the university. And your story with the respect for the teens, the communication among the teens, and the importance, when we share that with our students, they're motivated, they're interested, and then they go into the clinical field and they feel moral distress a year later. They don't feel like they belong, they don't feel like they're valued or respected. And we lose a lot of brand new nurses to that distress because they can't practice at the level and the caliber that we try to teach them. So I'd like to know if we can share your story, and again, I thank you for really respecting us as individuals and as teens, important teens, and valuing that.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, it is one of the other good things that came out of it. I got a lot of messages, once I was back in the car, from people that had been through, whether it was an accident of their own or an illness of some kind, and it took some sort of inspiration from the story. And I mean, that's incredible for me. I just did what I needed to do to get back in a car. And if that somehow, finds its way to someone else and helps someone else, whether it's on, the nursing side or the patient side, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That was a great question.
It's interesting, and I'm the last person because this is a comment more than a question. I guess I can speak for everybody in the room here safely that there are some days in our work when we have a really bad day, professionally, emotionally, and we go home thinking, why am I here? There are other jobs that are less demanding. But then stories like yours fuel us. They propel us to keep doing what we're doing. We're more committed to what we're doing. So thank you so much for sharing.
No, thank you. The sad truth is probably that there's a lot more stories like this that you guys never hear. There's probably patients that you've worked with that don't get the opportunity or the platform to really express how thankful they are. One of the things I've subsequently become very good friends with Dr. Tim Pullman, who was my trauma surgeon, which seems pretty commonsensical to me. The guy saved my life. But he brings up that he's a trauma surgeon. Patients come in he's never met, he fixes them, they leave, they go on to whatever, he maintains very few relationships with people that he's saved, for lack of a better term. And for him it was interesting, my family's reaction to the whole situation and how we approached him and made an effort to kind of befriend this man. And for him, it's kind of every time we get together, he says it's this constant reminder of what he does. He doesn't. I don't have to say anything. He just has to see me, or he turns on a race and watches, and he's like, "Hey, I'm doing something here," And there's people out there every day where that's true for each and every single person in this room, whether you get to see them on TV or not. And you probably don't know most of it, but the difference that you guys make and the help that you provide to so many people that just don't have the ability one way or the other for one reason or another to tell you that and share that with you. So yeah, on those bad days, just know that you're helping so many people, and it's appreciated far beyond how it's expressed or verbalized back to you guys. You are doing very, very remarkable work for a lot of people, for sure. So yeah, to you guys.
So James,
Yes.
this sounds very formal after listening to your very intimate story. On behalf of Wounds Canada, we're very grateful that you're here today, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.